About a third of all grown-ups have a snake phobia, but if you decide to become an astronaut not to have to deal with them, it might not be a great idea. According to Story Musgrave, there are snakes in space. Musgrave is one of the most experienced astronauts in the world right now. He is the second astronaut who managed to go on 6 space flights and fly on all the space shuttles. With that much experience and time in space, he has to have 1 or 2 space horror stories in his career. Once on a space mission, he looked out of the window and saw something resembling a snake. Musgrave said it was 6 to 8 feet long and looked like a snake, but many people don't believe his story. They claim it was some trash floating in space or something that had detached from the spacecraft. But the astronaut went on another mission and saw the creature again. The first time he spotted it, it could be some detached piece from the spacecraft. But what are the chances of that happening twice? He gave many interviews in which he explained these crazy encounters. Let's hope those snakes stay in space and don't come crashing down on Earth. If they are real, of course. Snake rain would not be fun. As we all know, space is like a giant vacuum chamber with 0 air, and sound can't travel there, making this story even more terrifying. To communicate, astronauts have a special system in their suits to exchange information. Young Li Wei shared his terrifying experience, and it's hard to believe it actually happened. You would be terrified if you were alone at home and someone started knocking on your door at night. Of course, if you weren't expecting anyone. Imagine the same scenario, but you're in space. You hear some knocking, you have nowhere to run, you're trapped in a metal can floating into nothingness. Young was sitting in his spacecraft, minding his own business, when he suddenly heard knocking coming from outside. How is it possible? Sound can't travel in space. The noise was unique. The astronaut described it as if someone had been knocking on an iron bucket with a wooden hammer. Li Wei looked outside, but to his surprise, there was nothing there. He investigated a bit more, but couldn't find the source of the sound. When Young returned to Earth, he was eager to tell scientists about what had happened, but he could not recreate the sound. To add fuel to the fire, his colleagues, who were on the same mission from 2005 to 2008, said they had also heard knocking similar to what Young had reported. This is still a mystery. Nobody knows what happened then. Maybe it was just spacecraft noise, like those your house randomly makes. We've already mentioned that sound can't travel in space, but that doesn't stop weird noises. The Apollo 10 mission was one of the most significant space missions ever. So, astronauts had to ensure everything was perfect before they went on a moon exploration journey. 3 people were on that mission: Thomas Stafford, module pilot John Young, and lunar module pilot Eugene Cernan. They had to do tons of gear tests for the upcoming Apollo 11 missions. The astronauts were circling the moon when they heard music coming from somewhere. It wasn't like Ed Sheeran's concert, it was more like constant loud screaming. Then, it was quiet whistling. They were terrified. Imagine being in space for the first time and hearing weird noises. The sounds lasted for a whole hour. The astronauts had never heard anything like that before. The sound was otherworldly and creepy. When they returned to Earth, they didn't know if they should tell someone about their experience because it was hard to believe. Michael Collins, an astronaut from the Apollo 11 mission, later shared that he had also heard this sound. But there is a kind of logical explanation for this. Engineers from NASA said that the sound that they had heard had been caused by the interference with the communication system. So you can relax and throw your tinfoil hat in the trash. But before you do that, Al Worden, an astronaut from the Apollo 15 mission, said that this explanation was unlikely, so we might never find out what really caused the sound. Leroy Chiao was the commander of the International Space Station in 2005. When it comes to space, He's seen a lot of things that can send chills down your spine. One encounter he and his crew had will live on in their head rent-free forever. Chow was sitting in the space station doing his job when he suddenly spotted light from the corner of his eye. He took a closer look, and it resembled an upside-down V, floating and glowing in space. Leroy later explained that he hadn't been scared by the object. Quite the opposite. He was extremely excited to see it, even though he had no idea what it was. His crew also saw the strange object. Chow was convinced he was visited by something not from Earth. His team could also vouch that indeed they saw something unexplainable. The information about this encounter is all over the internet, and many people are skeptical. It could have been anything. There are more than 10,000 satellites in space right now. It could have been a satellite floating in space. Another theory is that those were lights reflecting from a fishing boat on Earth. But who knows? There may be another logical explanation for this phenomenon waiting to be discovered. Horror stories don't stop there. This one is hard to believe, and it's up to you to figure out if it's true. Astronaut Alan Bean was the fourth individual to set foot on the moon's surface. When he was on the Apollo 12 mission, he claimed he saw a unique shape on the moon. It was shiny and shaped like a shoe. It's hard to know what he saw because he passed away in 2018. Chinese lunar rover Yutu 2 also discovered some shiny substance on the moon. Scientists say it was something gel-like. It could be a glaze that formed when something impacted the moon's surface, like a meteorite or something else. But in the future, we might find a better explanation for this strange find. This may sound wicked, but many countries send animals to space before humans follow them. Take Miss Baker, a squirrel monkey, Ham the chimp, and many more. Many of these animals returned to Earth safely and lived happily ever after, like Ham the chimp that lived for 26 years. But some weren't so lucky. Astronauts are still creeped out when they see animals floating in space. Imagine seeing something like that in a dark vacuum. No matter how tough you are, after that, you will be afraid of your own shadow. This may be sad, but it was an essential step in space exploration. The following horror story comes from space engineer Musa Manarov. This guy came across something that made scientists confused. He was shooting a video of space when he accidentally filmed some shiny object flying in the distance. The thing had a cylindrical shape, and Manarov thought it was something that had detached from the spacecraft. But he was unsure because it moved in a unique way. When you think of a creepy space story, the first thing that comes to your mind is some creature crawling on the spacecraft, or some weird object flying in space. But all those things are highly unlikely to happen. When somebody asked Chris Hadfield what the scariest thing about space was, he said it was asteroids. There are thousands of them in space, and the spacecraft is constantly getting hit by them. Chris said that he'd always heard sounds from asteroids hitting his spacecraft. He also mentioned that the spacecraft's solar panels were covered with holes. And you never know whether a giant asteroid will come and hit your spacecraft.
When you think of astronauts going to space, you probably imagine those cool things they can do up there. First of all, it's flying like a superhero all the time. Astronauts hold onto rails and use their arm strength to move among modules. It probably takes some time to get used to this way of moving around, but in a couple of months in space, they can become real acrobats. They also read books, watch movies, or take awesome pictures of Earth through the cupola windows, which is a special viewing area on the space station. They also invent new games, like the one where they try to hit a target, or where they race one another from one end of the station to the other as fast as they can. And zero-gravity sports must be so cool. Imagine playing soccer up there. It's the only way I'd ever be able to do a bicycle kick properly. It's cool how they eat or try to catch a bite from a floating spoon. But besides all these fun things, they need to sleep too. And that's not so easy in space. Not having gravity can be cool when you fool around and fly across your chamber. But it's definitely not that great when you're tired and can't wait for your head to hit the pillow. Because in space, that won't happen. Instead, astronauts have to sleep in small sleeping bags attached to the wall. This way, they won't float around or potentially bump into things while they're sleeping. No sleepwalkers up there, only sleep floaters. Astronaut orbited our home planet a whopping 17 times in a spacecraft, proving humans could live, work, and sleep in space. But just because it's possible doesn't mean it's easy. Some astronauts described their space capsule as a small garbage can, and the cabin itself is about the size of the front seat of a Volkswagen Beetle. Sleeping in space is very different from sleeping on Earth, to say the least. There is no up or down in space, so astronauts can choose any position they find comfortable. On the International Space Station, sleeping quarters are about the size of a phone booth. It's a tight space, and it doesn't look as cool as the rest of the things up there, but they make it work. Astronauts have to sleep near an air vent to make sure they have good ventilation. Breathing is trickier in space because the carbon dioxide they breathe out can form a bubble around their heads, which can be problematic since they may not get enough oxygen. Astronauts cover up windows to block out sunlight and may wear sleep masks, just like some people on Earth do to block out light. The sun in space can be really bright even with window shades because there's no atmosphere to filter sunlight. Oh, those things we take for granted down here. Also, the space station orbits Earth every 90 minutes, so astronauts get to see a new sunrise every hour and a half. The station can be noisy too, since they have all those fans and other equipment, so astronauts sometimes wear earplugs to help them sleep. We all become grumpy if we don't get enough sleep, with or without gravity. Not just that, a lack of sleep can affect our blood pressure, immune system, balance, and health in general. And it's way trickier when you're not feeling well up there than on Earth. NASA schedules its astronauts for about 8 to 8.5 hours of sleep per day. But those who work on the ISS, on average, go with 6 hours of sleep because the space environment can disrupt their natural sleep patterns. That's why it's not so unusual to have insomnia and sleep deprivation when in space. Astronauts sometimes have changes in their schedules. They have to work long shifts or finish tasks assigned at night. All this works against good sleep. That's why NASA has sleep education and promotes special relaxation techniques to help crew members sleep better. Dreams and nightmares are as common in space as they are on Earth. You just can't get away from your mind making up different scenarios while you're sleeping. And you know that feeling when you first wake up all groggy and sluggish? It's like your body and brain are still trying to catch up and fully wake up. You might feel a little bit disoriented, plus it might be hard for you to think clearly or move quickly. It's called sleep inertia. This feeling usually goes away after a little while, but it's probably way harder to get rid of it in space because many astronauts have issues with it. And even if you had perfect conditions for sleep, just being in space would probably disrupt your body's natural sleep-wake cycle. Two things regulate this cycle: the S process and circadian rhythms. The S process controls whether we are asleep or awake throughout the day. In space, your body gets less deep sleep, which means it goes through some changes in the S process. Circadian rhythms help regulate our internal body clock as well. In space, where such cues as exposure to light and darkness are a complete mess, you can't simply set your alarm clock at 7 a.m. every morning. At least up there, I'd have a good excuse for not doing this. To help astronauts adjust, NASA has added special lighting inside the space station, which mimics a regular day on Earth. They try to block out outside light at night and provide enough light during the day to help astronauts stay awake and sleep at the right times as much as possible. Astronauts need to be careful not to get exposed to blue light from electronic devices because that disrupts sleep too. That tip sounds familiar. We need to figure out as many tricks as possible to get better sleep because we don't want to go on a mission to Mars and come to our potential new home all grumpy and moody. Plus, people who will go on these special space missions won't have as much space as astronauts on the ISS. Their quarters may not be like the comfortable bedrooms they have back on Earth, but they will still be dark, quiet, and best of all, private. At the same time, say goodbye to privacy on your way to the moon. On such missions, there will be less space for crew members to sleep. It will be like camping with your friends, but with not enough tents. And imagine jet lag in space. It usually hits astronauts even before they get to the space station. To help with this, they start adjusting their sleep schedules a few days before they launch into space. They change their sleeping and waking times to match the time of day and time zone of their launch location. Once they reach the space station where astronauts from different countries work together, they all switch to using a common time called Greenwich Mean Time, GMT. This helps everyone synchronize their schedules because it's a middle ground time that can be easily understood by people from different parts of the world. So to help crew members have better sleep, scientists have simulated space missions on Earth. They have a special habitat called Hera at Johnson Space Center, which is almost the same size as a lunar base or spacecraft. Crews live there for certain periods, and researchers study their sleep patterns and performance. NASA is planning a cool experiment called the Crew Health and Performance Exploration Analog, SHPEA. The first mission is supposed to start soon with 4 crew members, a commander, a medical officer, a flight engineer, and a science officer, living in a habitat called Mars Dune Alpha at NASA's Johnson Space Center. They will live in the 3D-printed habitat and exercise, cook, clean, do other things, and collect data just like they would on the Red Planet. I mean, we still have a decade or two till the first human missions on Mars, but we better hurry and prepare well.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We'll be ready to take off in 3, 2, 1. Living on a spaceship sounds like a sci-fi movie topic, but gradually turns into a plan for the distant future dream. Let's imagine how it would be. Without further ado, I'll start with the light. On Earth, thanks to the atmosphere, the sky scatters the sunlight, so we get light in different directions. Then there are shadows, contrast, and ambient light. In a spaceship, however, there's no sky to create that cool ambient light. When you're in a spacecraft inside a solar system, one side of the ship can be lightened by the sun or another star, and one side can stay in the shadow. You can think of it as the crescent moon. If your spacecraft manages to go far away from any solar system, you might say goodbye to the bright side of the ship. You would be very far from all stars, so the ship is going to fly in the deep darkness. Don't worry though, the advanced technology will probably find a way to imitate the sunlight. Maybe designers will place LED light panels similar to windows, and inhabitants of the ship wouldn't notice the difference. What about people? A study revealed that a crew of 160 people could create a viable population for 200 years. Here, the important thing is to select the crew members from a large gene pool. No 2 passengers should be closer than 6th or 7th degree cousins. This is a projection from our day. Who knows, maybe hundreds of years later, whole countries will live in a spaceship. Your neighbor country in the world will be your neighbor in space. This reminds me of the scene from Thor Ragnarok, when the Asgardians who survived Hela escaped with the Grandmaster's ship. They went to Earth to settle down. Maybe we would go to Proxima Centauri b. It's an exoplanet, which is the term used to define planets beyond our solar system. Proxima b is in another star system, and some scientists do believe it has the potential. Some of them believe that there's a possibility that liquid water exists on the surface of a planet. It's important because this planet is our nearest neighboring exoplanet. Yeah, the nearest one, but it's almost 25 trillion miles away. To better understand this proximity, I'll give you a comparison. Currently, one of the fastest spaceships, called New Horizons, goes a whopping speed of more than 30,000 miles per hour. But even with this speed, it would take thousands of years to get to Proxima b. Let's hope we figure out how to warp the space-time equation by then. If I'm realistic, the first option is more likely. Let's assume we made a trip with our fastest spaceships. This would still be a couple of 100-year journey. This leads to another minor problem: the lifespan of humans. The same crew cannot make it to the end of the ride. Here, generation ships shine as a solution. A community of adults enter the ship, then their children, and their children. You know, until humanity finally reaches the new planet. There are 2 other alternatives. If researchers somehow made a way to make people live for centuries, we wouldn't need generation ships. Similarly, there could be a system to freeze people. It'll take 20,000 people to start a healthy population on a new planet. For now, I want to stick with the first scenario. Here's how it would be to live in a generation spacecraft. Dating wouldn't be as romantic as it is on Earth. There's probably a geneticist who will regulate reproduction. Freedom of choice in general would be decreased. The rules will be strict. In every generation, there should be certain tasks to manage. Someone should be a doctor, and someone else should be a plumber. New generations may go under a career planning test. Everyone would be assigned occupations based on their merits, aptitude, passions, and available jobs. It reminds me of Snowpiercer, but hopefully things would go humanely and better in this version. People all need water, and they'll create waste. By then, maybe we wouldn't rely on plastic. Plus, recycling may be on another level. Still, we will need water. A healthy human needs almost 300 gallons of water per year. It's not like they'll stop by on a planet and refill the water reserves. So how can spaceship residents solve this problem? There are already systems to recycle some astronauts' waste into pure water. The next issue is infirmary. A spaceship might have almost no bacteria or microbes. People need them for a stronger immune system. If they get too isolated and land on a planet, they may have difficulty coping with the potential conditions there. Shielding carries importance too. Deep space is a radioactive place. Our planet has a magnetic field that protects us from DNA frying waves. Out in the open, the spaceship will need a strong shield. Maybe we'll be able to create some sort of force field. NASA is working on systems to grow plants in space. We will probably see special sections dedicated to farming and livestock. I also feel like this type of ship would also carry flora and fauna samples too. Who knows, maybe there'll be specific parks and different mini ecosystems. This would be great for the sanity of people on the ship. I mean, it's great to maintain the existence of the human race, but existential crises can mess with the passengers. They can eat their space sandwiches in the park and relax a bit with the sound of tweeting birds. Not just a garden, the young passengers might need a playground and school. Well, in this case, cabins, to get an education. They'll probably have a whole new curriculum, How to Stay Alive on a Foreign Planet 101. By the time we have this ship AI, and high-tech robots will probably be more popular than ever, there might be self-propagating robots. We can send these robots to our potentially new planet first and see how it turns out. We can even send robot teams to multiple worlds and see which one has a better habitat. I admit, generation ships look like an idea derived from Hollywood blockbusters, but there's an initiative called the 100-Year Starship Project. Mark G. Millis, the founder of the Tau Zero Foundation, is one of the participants involved in this project. They designed a probe named the Icarus. It has the theoretical capability to accelerate to 1/10 or 1/5 the speed of light. Although the current design of Icarus is not particularly sleek, resembling a skyscraper-sized behemoth composed mainly of rows and clusters of spherical fuel tanks. Millis explains that it's not a definitive representation of what an interstellar craft may look like, but rather the design that makes the most sense to build initially. When it comes to designing starships for humans, gravity is a key consideration in preventing the erosion of bone and muscle density. The solution is to create gravity with a rotating cabin or centrifuge, but it must be large enough to consistently simulate Earth's gravity to avoid disorientation and other health issues. Is there an arrival plan? Assuming that we land to Europa or Proxima b, the crew and the passengers need to be prepared for different scenarios. There should be equipment to scan the territory, or even self-defense gadgets to protect themselves from potentially hostile life forms. Once they successfully arrive, they need tools to build their homes too. When they finally arrive at their new planet, they might start advanced technology to travel around other planets. Hi Mom, I brought you a rock as a gift from the surface of Mars. There could be new occupations and a live space travel guide, and we might need some type of document like a visa to enter other habitable planets. There's a meteorite rain expected, so stay at your base for the next 2 years, says the newscaster. Okay, I'll calm down here. So how would you picture a vessel capable of ferrying humans from one solar system to another? Would it have some sort of wings, or would it look like a rocket? Tell me more about the design in your mind.
We still can't find the source of the mysterious signal we've been receiving since 2018. We receive it every 22 minutes, and nothing can explain this. Some scientists even believe it could be coming from another civilization we haven't met yet. This strange radio signal wasn't found by a scientist on a serious mission. It was actually discovered by a college student just doing a regular project for school. Tyrone O'Doherty, an undergrad student at Curtin University in Australia, was sifting through old data of the southern sky. He was looking for any weird blinking radio signals. He finally stumbled upon one from 2018 that seemed to shoot radio waves towards Earth like a lighthouse beam. Excited about his find, Tyrone shared it with his mentor, radio astronomer Natasha Hurley-Walker. She dove into researching this signal, hoping for a breakthrough. But despite checking different frequency data, they hit a dead end. But then, Natasha spotted a pattern. The signal repeated every 18 minutes. This was huge. But just as they were gearing up to study it further, poof! The signal vanished after only 3 months, leaving them with nothing. Not giving up, Natasha and her team scanned the skies again, desperate for a clue. Months passed, but nothing turned up. They were ready to give up, and then suddenly, a new signal popped up. This one kept blinking for 5 minutes, then it disappeared. And then it came back exactly 22 minutes later. The main question was if that signal was related to an 18-minute one. To figure it out, Natasha went back to the old radio data from that area. As they dug deeper, they realized that yes, and these signals aren't anything new. They've been beaming towards Earth for 35 years. Back in 1988, Indian and American telescopes had caught them, but they got buried under tons of other data. This was great news for space explorers because it meant they could now calculate how far away this mysterious object was. After doing the math, they figured out it was incredibly far, even on a space scale, 15,000 light-years from Earth. Now, the only thing left to uncover was what exactly this object was. Walker and his team started comparing it to all the known radio-emitting objects out there. Yet its source remains a mystery. The signals still pop up every 22 minutes on NASA screens, always ending with a frustrating match not found message. The scientists called it J183910. Some think that the signal might come from some extraterrestrial beings. Maybe it's the signal that SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, has been waiting for. This project has been working for over 50 years, trying to find any evidence of life beyond Earth. They also scan the skies for radio waves, laser pulses, and other mysterious signals. So maybe it's a way for extraterrestrial folk to communicate their location. While that idea may sound exciting, we need to be careful about jumping to conclusions. First, we don't have solid proof for that. Before any concrete evidence, it's just speculation. And also, there are other more plausible explanations. Most likely it comes from a natural phenomenon, and there are a couple of theories for that. The first one is the pulsar theory. Imagine a huge star in space much bigger than our Sun. Sometimes these big stars finish their life journeys in a spectacular event called a supernova. When this happens, the star's core collapses, becoming super compact, as if you're squeezing all the stuff from that star into a tiny space. That tiny, super-dense core is called a neutron star. Some of these neutron stars are extra special. We call them pulsars. They get their name because they seem to pulse with energy, like a space lighthouse. These pulsars have incredibly strong magnetic fields, much stronger than what you'd find on Earth. They're like enormous magnets in space. Because of this, they shoot out beams of energy. They're also spinning super fast, so these beams of energy seem to pulse on and off as they spin around. Now, the strange signal we detected seems to have similarities with pulsars, but not quite. Pulsars usually have a predictable lifespan and slow down over time, eventually stopping their radio signals. In contrast, our mysterious signal is quite persistent and is blinking beyond what's expected for pulsars. So, maybe it's not a typical pulsar, or not a pulsar at all. There's also a magnetar theory. Now, a magnetar is another type of neutron star. They're like supercharged versions of pulsars, with even stronger magnetic fields and slightly longer pulsating periods. Maybe this is what causes our signal's intense persistence. However, when we plotted the data, we also realized the signal didn't match the magnetar's vibes either. Magnetars not only send out radio waves, but also powerful X-rays because they're so energetic. But the signal we received was only sending out radio waves. So we figured it's not a pulsar and not a magnetar. The signal's behavior is very strange and suggests an unnatural source. This means there might be something in the universe that scientists haven't fully explored yet. And there is a space object that we don't know much about. The final theory is the so-called dwarf pulsar. Sounds a little dopey to me. Couldn't help myself. Now, a dwarf pulsar is like a star that blinks with light flashes, similar to pulsars, but it takes longer for each blink. Usually, white dwarfs are the leftovers from smaller stars. They don't blink because their magnetic field isn't as strong as pulsars. But when a white dwarf becomes pretty hefty, almost the mass of our Sun, it gets super dense and starts pulsating with a strong magnetic field, just like pulsars. They have a cool quirk. White dwarfs are made of electrons, not neutrons like pulsars. When these charged electrons start dancing with a magnetic field, they shoot out periodic light flashes, which happen every 100 to 1,000 seconds. As you remember, our signal has a period of 22 minutes, 1,320 seconds. A bit longer than the usual white dwarf pulsars, but it's much closer to the truth. So far, this sounds like the most plausible explanation. But even this theory isn't fully confirmed yet. This just shows how much there is in the universe that we're still figuring out. For example, fast radio bursts, another mysterious type of signal we've been detecting. They're like quick, intense bursts of energy in the form of radio waves. They have a ton of energy. FRBs are so powerful that sometimes they can be brighter than entire galaxies. Now, imagine this. They release as much energy in a few milliseconds as our Sun does in 3 whole days. Wow! These bursts happen all over the sky with huge frequencies, although some have been detected with lower frequencies. Every day, we catch around 10,000 random FRBs in the sky. Some of them repeat, but most happen once and disappear forever. Unfortunately, most of them only last for a fraction of a second, and by the time their energy reaches us, it's 1,000 times weaker than a mobile phone signal from the moon. This is why, despite their brightness, there's still a lot we don't understand about them. We're still trying to figure out what causes these FRBs. They could be coming from different sources, like already mentioned magnetars, colliding stars, or even merging galaxies or white dwarfs. As these bursts travel through space, they pick up information about the cosmic environments they pass through, like interstellar gas clouds. It's very unlikely that FRBs are some messages from extraterrestrial beings, though. Not only because there are thousands of them every day all across the sky, but also because we know that the sources of these bursts must be incredibly energetic themselves. Our neighbors would have to have equipment stronger than entire galaxies for that. But the bottom line is, while all these signals are fascinating, there's still a ton to learn about them.
You've been training for this for years. You know you're ready. You're standing on the door's threshold. You take a deep breath and bravely open it. You jump outside the International Space Station and into the vastness of space. Ah, this never gets old, you say on the transmitter device. You feel like a feather whenever moving through space. Except for the suit, of course. It's true what that guy told you one day. Astronaut suits limit your body's movement by 20%. For you, that means you've got a 20% higher chance of being clumsy in outer space, which is never good odds. There's not a lot of room for error during a spacewalk. You finally get to the docking port. You look around and see the part of the station that needs fixing. This is where other space shuttles dock when they come in from Earth or other planets. About a week ago, a shuttle coming from Jupiter miscalculated the landing and broke a piece of the port. You've attached the new shield to your suit's belt. Now all you've got to do is screw it on the station. You've spent hours training underwater to do this. You wore a heavy, hot, uncomfortable suit inside a pool in order to get the training you needed. Incoming! Sarah shouts on the transmitter. You don't even have time to ask what, as an absurdly fast storm of space debris catches you off guard. It shakes everything around you. You try to hold on tight to the strap that's keeping you safe, but oh no! A piece of debris just hit your helmet shield. Come in, Bob, are you okay? Sarah asks you through the radio. You got a bit shocked by the impact, but everything seems fine. The meteorites are finally gone, so you can focus on your task now. You pull the rope that's connecting the new docking shield closer to your body, but the other part of the rope has nothing on it. Zip. Nada. Oh my, you think to yourself. Come in, Sarah, we have a lost shield. I repeat, we have a lost shield. This is a pretty serious situation, and you are aware of it. Anything that falls into space can go into a collision route with the International Space Station or with other space vehicles. You try to remember your training, but your mind goes blank. This is worse than that one time you broke your girlfriend's favorite ceramic jar. Sarah, the other astronaut who's with you on the ship, is shouting words on the transmitter. Oh no, Bob. Tell me you didn't do this. This is a total catastrophe. I'm coming outside. You spot the shield under the ISS. It's the size of a medium-sized car door, and it's moving quite fast. Here's what can happen in this scenario. The shield could head back down to Earth and break into the atmosphere. It would probably catch fire and disintegrate on the way down, but anyways, it would make NASA and you look pretty bad. The other option is the car door-sized shield gains momentum, and it orbits all the way to hit the ISS, and you for that matter. Or some satellite that happens to be in a similar orbit. Here's the thing. If you ever thought that space was an infinite void, you got that part wrong. Since different countries started to build equipment strong enough to travel in space, space has been more crowded than ever. Not with people, but with satellites, asteroids, and space debris. You were surprised when you learned that Earth receives meteorite showers every single day, but they're so small that no one on the surface of the planet notices it. They usually turn to ashes before hitting the ground, but that's not all. What just happened to you on this mission has happened on several other missions before. Astronauts keep losing stuff in outer space. So much so that NASA had to create a division to track down and monitor the orbit of all debris that is just floating carelessly around. You couldn't believe it when someone told you that there are over 23,000 softball-sized pieces of debris roaming around in space, and if we're talking about smaller objects, then that number goes up to 500,000. As you were about to unstrap yourself and dangerously venture through outer space without any protection, you notice Sarah has beat you to it. You can't let her do this alone, so you decide to tag along. FYI, this is against every NASA handbook and training you ever received in your life. But you think, if this works in sci-fi movies, it must work for us. Even though we all know that's very far from the truth. Sarah's close to the debris shield, but her body weight makes her orbit in a completely different direction. Okay, you think to yourself, this is your turn to shine and be a hero. You try moving your arms like you would do underwater, but there's no friction in space. Duh. You can't butterfly swim your way to rescue the rogue equipment. You try to contact Sarah, but she doesn't come in. I guess you're on your own now. For some reason, you start to orbit in a similar route as the floating car door shield. It must be the amount of stuff you've got strapped onto yourself. Or maybe it was the breakfast burrito you had that morning. You feel like you're George Clooney in the movie Gravity. No, better yet, you feel like Obi-Wan Kenobi. Yes, you're feeling as strong and powerful as a Jedi right now. You keep your hands stretched before your body, hoping you'll gently collide with the space debris. And 3, 2, 1, and the landing was successful. Just joking, but yes, you managed to dock onto the debris. Hooray. Now what? You think? Guess you needed to have gone through that plan of yours a little bit more, huh? You still have no way of steering the debris. And now, you have no way to contact mission control and tell them the object, and yourself, are en route to somewhere. Don't get scared. You didn't come this far to get scared. What's the best thing you can do? First, take a mental picture of the Earth. It never disappoints from up here. Then, you try to play out the possible scenarios that could happen in the situationship you're in. Your normal body weight would not be enough to get you out of Earth's orbit. In the hypothetical scenario in which this did happen, you'd probably be vacuumed into Venus's orbit and spend a quite unpleasant period of your life around immense heat. Even though in Greek mythology, Venus represents love, there is nothing lovely about orbiting close to this planet, and you know this. If you got too close, your spacesuit would never be able to take on the heat. It's only made to sustain temperatures of around 250 degrees Fahrenheit tops, and Venus's atmosphere can heat up to 700 degrees Fahrenheit. But honestly, the worst-case scenario is much simpler than that. Your spacesuit could decide to drown your ears, nose, and mouth in water. Yup, this has happened on spacewalks before yours. You see, in order to keep your spacesuit chill and cool, the suit relies on a gallon's worth of water that makes up for a cooling system. This system, which is supposed to send recycled air into the back of your helmet, does leak sometimes. And since you're stranded in the middle of the big nowhere, you'd have only that nowhere to run. But wait, what's that popping up on the horizon? It's a modular space shuttle. You try shouting, but nobody can hear you outside your helmet. You wave with your hands, but it's coming straight at you. Finally, it took longer than I wished to find you, Sarah said. Apparently, she made it back to the space station just in time to catch you before you went definitely rogue. Guess I'll be losing some astronaut points for this little misadventure, huh? You say. And yes, you definitely will. Buckle up, fellow space enthusiasts, because we're about to uncover the celestial secrets that have been unveiled this year. From giant stars to organic molecules, this year is going great for astronomers. So let's catch up on all the excitement you might have missed in 2023. First of all, we've discovered some real astral monsters. Imagine looking up at the night sky and seeing stars that are not just big, but absolutely enormous. Scientists have been using a special telescope called the James Webb Space Telescope to explore the early days of the universe. And during their adventure, scientists stumbled upon ancient stars that are 10,000 times bigger than our sun. Yes, you heard it right, 10,000 times. These giants of the stellar world were some of the very first stars ever to form in the universe, billions of years ago. Imagine a globular cluster as a massive cosmic crew, where each group consists of a whopping 100,000 to 1 million members. These clusters are like giant family gatherings, with all the stars being born around the same time. But what makes these newly discovered monsters so special? Well, their cores, or their central parts, are way hotter than what we see in stars today. Scientists think that this intense heat might be due to a lot of hydrogen burning at really high temperatures. It's like they're having a galactic barbecue party. Something fascinating happens in these globular clusters. The smaller stars crash into the supermassive ones and gain extra energy, like a power-up. But here's the twist. Most of these clusters are now getting old, and the supermassive stars disappeared a long time ago. We can only see hints of their existence in the clusters we observe today. Scientists study them by just the mysterious traces of their grand presence. The discovery of these monster stars is incredibly important for our understanding of the universe. If scientists can gather more evidence to confirm their existence, it would be a major breakthrough. It would help us learn more about globular clusters and how supermassive stars form in general. But that was only the first fascinating discovery of 2023. Although the next one is kinda sad. You know those beautiful rings that make Saturn look so fancy? Well, guess what? They might disappear in the not-so-distant future, astronomically speaking. NASA's Cassini mission, which explored Saturn from 2004 to 2017, gathered some fascinating data about the rings. During Cassini's grand finale, when it did some cool maneuvers between Saturn, scientists noticed something surprising. The rings were losing a lot of mass every second. Tons of it. That means this magnificent halo will only stick around for a few 100 million more years, at most. That may seem like a long time for humans, but in the grand scheme of the universe, it's just a blink of an eye. The important thing is that we've learned that huge rings like Saturn's don't last forever. They eventually fade away. Oh, well, at least you and I personally won't catch this moment. Scientists have a fun theory about what will happen when Saturn's rings disappear. They think that the other ice and gas giants in our solar system, like Uranus and Jupiter, might have once had massive rings too. But over time, those rings wore down and became more like the thin, wispy bands of asteroids like what Uranus has now. Saturn's rings are mostly made of ice, but they also have a sprinkling of rocky dust. This dust comes from asteroids and teeny tiny meteoroids crashing into the celestial objects and breaking apart. It's like a snowstorm of icy particles and space debris. The research also revealed that Saturn's rings appeared long after the planet itself formed. They were still forming when dinosaurs roamed the Earth. So, in terms of astronomical age, they're actually quite young, only a few 100 million years old. This discovery has got scientists all excited because it means something dramatic happened in Saturn's past to create this stunning icy disk. But this is a mystery waiting to be solved. Scientists want to figure out what exactly caused the rings to form and why they have such a breathtaking structure. Let's hope they'll figure it out. But moving on to something more optimistic, we have another exciting space news. Recently, scientists have been studying one of the most distant galaxies in the universe, and they found something amazing: organic molecules. The galaxy in question has a long name, SPT 041847. It's over 12 billion light-years away from our little blue planet. Can you even imagine that distance? It's the farthest galaxy ever known, where complex organic molecules have been found. That's why looking at this galaxy is like looking at something from when the universe was just a baby. We have no idea what this galaxy looks like now. The light that has reached us is what it looked like when the universe was only 1.5 billion years old. Imagine being able to see things from so far in the past. So what they found is something with a very complicated name: a polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon molecule, or simply PAH molecule. You might be wondering, what in the world is that? Well, guess what? You can actually find these molecules right here on our planet. They can be in things like the smoke from car engines or even forest fires. PAH molecules are made up of chains of carbon atoms. And here's the super cool part: they're considered the basic building blocks for life. Imagine that, life's building blocks, those tiny carbon chains, being discovered in a galaxy that's so far away. That's like finding a needle in a haystack. They also found out that gas floating around in that galaxy is filled with heavy elements. That's a big deal because it suggests that many stars have come and gone there, creating all these amazing elements. This means that this galaxy can be potentially rich in many other elements too. This discovery opens up a world of possibilities and raises so many exciting questions. How did these molecules form in a galaxy so distant? And since we're looking into the past, what could have happened to these organic molecules during this time? Could they have evolved into life? We're only scratching the surface of the incredible things waiting to be uncovered. By the way, if it's so far, how did scientists even manage to discover something like that? Well, they had the instrument called the James Webb Space Telescope. This fancy telescope was recently launched and has superpowers when it comes to observing the universe. So when the scientists were studying this faraway galaxy, they had a little problem. The light coming from those distant objects was so faint that it was hard to see or detect. But guess what? They had a brilliant idea to solve this. They used something called gravitational lensing, which is like a special power of nature's magnifying glass. Imagine two galaxies lining up perfectly, just like in a photo shoot. The light from the faraway galaxy, the background one, travels towards us. But on its journey, it passes through the foreground galaxy, which is like a giant space lens. And guess what? The foreground galaxy's gravity bends the light, just like a magnifying glass, making it bigger and brighter. It's like having a cosmic zoom lens for our telescopes. This bending of light creates a super cool shape called an Einstein ring. It's like a halo, or a ring of light surrounding the foreground galaxy, basically a nature's way of showing off its magical powers. With gravitational lensing and these beautiful Einstein rings, scientists can see distant objects more clearly and learn amazing things about the universe. And thanks to all that, they managed to uncover the hidden chemical interactions from the early galaxies. Isn't that incredible? The scientists are beyond excited about this discovery. They never expected to find such complex organic molecules in a galaxy that's incredibly distant. Who knows? Maybe this is just the beginning of a thrilling cosmic journey. So, keep your eyes on the stars, fellow space explorers. The universe is full of surprises, and who knows what other mind-blowing discoveries await us out there. Let's hope we'll learn even more in the future.
Houston, we've got good news. A group of select humans is being interviewed to hop on board the first commercial vacation to outer space. The space agency has given you a survey to answer. They want to know what you would pack on this space adventure. Depending on your answers, you just might be one of the chosen ones. Now, how about we take a look at that list together? Pencils. I guess I never would have thought of that, but it makes sense. Legend has it that the US spent millions of dollars trying to design a pen that worked in space. You know, since the lack of gravity is a huge, inescapable factor of life in outer space, pens don't work. The ink won't flow down as it does here on Earth. It turns out that pencils will do the trick. This way you can play word puzzles with the other space tourists, or even make some drawings of your adventure. You'd never forget to pack a toothbrush, of course. According to veteran astronauts, toothbrushes are so simple, yet their technology is enough for space. If you were to squeeze a water bottle inside a spacecraft, the molecules of water would float around in small bubbles. But if you wet your toothbrush, it naturally holds the water in it, keeping it moist to receive your toothpaste. Oh, I was going to say funny socks. Glad that you beat me to it. Here are two things. First, there's not a lot of walking that goes on in space. People don't tend to touch the ground too much up there. And second, space isn't the best place to showcase your fashion style. Yeah! Astronauts tend to use special clothes while they're out there. And it will be no different for you as a space vacationer. So socks will keep your feet warm and fuzzy, but they'll also speak for your fashion interest. Maybe one day you'll wear a smiley face sock, while the other day you'll go for a Grinch-themed one. Of course, socks are pretty helpful on board an aircraft. They'll make you slide through stuff more easily. Next time I go to the convenience store, I'll remember to buy some wet wipes for your space travel. Experienced space travelers do love them. And it wasn't even NASA that invented them, huh? Since water is a no-go inside a spaceship, the best option is wet wipes. Better yet if they're scented. Astronauts even use different kinds of wipes. They buy the disinfecting ones and the ones to use on their bodies. Just make sure you know how to tell the difference between them when you're up there. There's a popular myth that says that NASA invented Velcro. But the truth is, we tend to think that everything that's used in space was invented by NASA for a very intelligent and specific purpose. It wasn't, though. Velcro was invented for mundane reasons back in the 1950s by a Swiss company. They were adopted by space travelers because they work as anti-gravity props. They don't erase gravity, of course. But you can glue Velcros into daily stuff and then hang them on the Velcro attached to the spaceship's walls. It's a very smart system, but best to take your own pair, right? If you're spending a long time in outer space, photographs from back home might come in handy. Choose them well, though. Since the spacecraft isn't all that big, the rest of the people on board will know which pictures you decided to bring along. Best to keep that Harry Styles poster back in your earthly bedroom, right? Just bring real pictures of people that you know and love. Did I hear pizza? A huge part of traveling and exploring new places is being able to taste different flavors of food.
In outer space, that's a bit more complicated. But hey, at least you can take some pizza with you. Well, actually, you'd have to have it delivered to you in a cargo ship. This way, ingredients would come fresh and ready to eat. It wouldn't be the first time that people in space tried eating Earthling junk food. Some astronauts have even eaten crepes and hot dogs. Perhaps the best part of this pizza party would be that your food could float. Now, isn't this a super nice way to enjoy some Earth delicacies? As much as I understand your desire to pack a toilet with you on this space trip, that's virtually impossible. I mean, I understand you. Some people are attached to the toilets in their homes, and a space toilet is far from the ideal experience. But NASA has been improving their toilet system, and it's the best it's been over the years. So that will have to do. Here's something I would take as well: a laptop. But what good would it do in outer space, you might ask? Apparently, there is internet all over the International Space Station. So even if you're not spending most of your trip docked at the ISS, you could enjoy some Netflix on the days you spend over there. There is internet all over the ISS, apparently. Crazy, huh? And speaking of leisure, I love that you would take a yo-yo. I'm not sure how efficient it would be in space, since there's no gravity to bounce it back and forth, but it would be nice to see how a yo-yo reacts in a gravity-free environment. Oh, I love jigsaw puzzles. This would definitely be on my list as well. Imagine trying to build a jigsaw puzzle that keeps floating in the air. Maybe you'll have to create a system to avoid the separate pieces floating aimlessly through the spacecraft. But imagine once you finish that turtle puzzle, it will look like it's swimming around the craft. You can't pack a window, but they sure are an important part of life in outer space. Let's keep in mind some of the rules of the trip. Each traveler will have the opportunity to do one spacewalk during their time in space. This is already huge. Consider yourself lucky. Some elite astronauts only get to do one spacewalk during their entire career. That is so because spacewalks are risky and require a lot of training. But you'll get your training once you're up there. The thing is, all other days you'll be stuck inside a floating tin can. So windows will come a long way. They'll help to remind you where you are. They'll give you some perspective of space and Earth. Of course, you should take your camera. How else will you be able to register for this once-in-a-lifetime experience? Just make sure it works inside an aircraft or the ISS and you're good to go. Coffee? Don't worry, you don't need to pack your own. Up until recently, astronauts had to rely solely on instantly brewed cups of coffee when they were in space. But you're lucky that coffee experts have already solved this issue. Nowadays, there's the IS espresso machine. The machine itself is similar in size to an Earthling espresso machine. But to drink it, space travelers have to use a zero-gravity coffee cup together with a straw. If you try drinking it regularly, you wouldn't get hot coffee to hit you directly in your face. Instead, the coffee would be glued to the bottom of your cup. I have to say I really stand this invention. Last, but not least, why not pack your guitar with you? I noticed you were missing a musical instrument. If this was a conventional flight, you might have to pay extra for luggage. But since it's all included, don't be shy and take your guitar. Astronauts such as Chris Hadfield take their musical instruments with them when they're in space. He even became famous for his version of Bowie's Space Oddity, up to the point that Bowie himself told him he lived Chris's version of it. It helps to pass the time, but it's also great for socializing. Can you imagine a pretend bonfire happening in the void of space? I can, and it looks super cool. Well, I think you're set to go. I'll personally call NASA and ask them to pick you as one of the lucky space travelers. See you in outer space, amigo.
You get the last instructions from the team and get into your spaceship. It's the first spacecraft made on Earth that can move at a speed close to the speed of light. Your task is to visit the most unusual and terrifying places in space and send scientists detailed information about them. And so, your journey begins. Your spacecraft is accelerating, and you dash past the moon. In the distance, you see a small reddish planet. It's Mars. And look at that spectacular giant surrounded by a set of rings. That's Saturn. You wish you could have more time to explore this gas giant, but you have to hurry. You pass by beautiful stars. Some of them are luminous, others have a reddish hue, and some seem to be dimming. That's Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky on Earth. It's about 8.6 light years away from us, but you're traveling fast, and soon you see Polaris, aka the North Star, which is way further, 431 light years away. Sometimes you manage to spot tiny dots circling these stars. Those are planets. And then, suddenly, you see nothing. At first, you're horrified. Something has gone wrong, and you've accidentally entered a black hole? Has your equipment malfunctioned? Because it seems that at a distance of 700 million light-years away from Earth, there's a hole. A blank void with no galaxies, stars, planets, or asteroids. You can't see anything. The void is a roughly spherical region of about 330 million light-years across. Our home Milky Way galaxy could fit in there billions of times over. And then it dawns on you. What you're looking at is the mysterious Boötes void. It lies about 700 million light-years away from Earth in the constellation of Boötes, the herdsman driving the plow around the North Pole. At first, this void was called the Great Nothing, but later it was given its current name. Now we know that galaxies look like a giant web. Most of them are parts of long structures called filaments. Those wind through the cosmos, and when they meet, they form regions with a high concentration of galaxies. These regions are what we know as galaxy clusters, but between these clusters and threads, there are ginormous empty voids that hardly contain any galaxies. Such voids actually make up almost 80% of the observable universe, and most of them are huge, from 30 to 300 million light-years wide. The Boötes void is one of the most massive ones. It's even earned the title of supervoid. Astronomers think it might be the result of a few smaller voids merging together. But what could have caused such giant empty areas to appear in the first place? The reason might lie in the origin of the universe. In its early days, all the matter in the universe was packed together quite tightly. Astronomers even think it was something like a uniform soup. But pretty soon, random quantum fluctuations started distributing this matter. Some areas became denser. As a result, their gravitational pull became stronger, and they began stealing matter from less dense regions. This made such areas even denser, and they kept attracting more and more matter. At the same time, smaller clumps of matter started drifting further away from the center, forming galaxies. After staring at nothingness for some time, you decide to explore other space objects and start the engine of your spacecraft again. There's one kind of space formation you've been looking forward to seeing: nebulas. Those are gigantic clouds of gas and dust. With time, gravity starts to pull these clumps of dust and gas together. They grow larger and larger, and their gravity gets more powerful. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? One day, this mass becomes so big that it collapses under its own gravity and forms new stars. So, you decide to visit some of the most beautiful nebulas out there. And you start with the Butterfly Nebula. This butterfly's wingspan is more than 3 light-years. And the structure inside the nebula is one of the most complicated ever observed. The central star, a white dwarf, is heated to an incredible 450,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It means it was formed from a gargantuan star, likely more than 5 times the size of our sun. The white dwarf is surrounded by a thick disk of dust and gas at the equator. That's what probably makes the whole structure look like an hourglass or a butterfly. The next place you decide to visit is the Eskimo Nebula, 5,000 light-years away from Earth in the constellation of Gemini. It was discovered more than 200 years ago and got its name for a reason. Its double shell formation looks like a person's face hidden in a padded hood of a winter jacket. But in reality, this parka is a disk of material with a ring of comet-shaped objects. And the tails of these objects stream away from the star at the center of the Eskimo Nebula. The bizarre orange streaks in the outer part of the cloud stretch light-years away in all directions. As for the Eskimo's face, even though it resembles a ball of twine, in reality, it's a bubble of material blown into space by the wind of high-speed material produced by the central star. Your next destination is the Ring Nebula. At first sight, it's a giant cloud of dust and gas surrounding an old, almost extinguished star, which does look like a ring. But astronomers say the nebula isn't a bagel, it's a jelly-filled donut. The deep space colorful object more than 2,000 light-years away from Earth is actually a ring that wraps around a blue, ball-shaped structure. Each end of the structure sticks out of the ring's opposite sides. Now you can head to a place called the Pillars of Creation. You find it more than 7,000 light-years away from Earth in the Eagle Nebula. That's a young cluster of stars just 5.5 million years old, space babies. Once, the Hubble Space Telescope managed to take an image of several dark silhouettes near the nebula's center. And now you can see them with your own eyes. Those are the so-called Pillars of Creation, an active star-forming region. And since you've already visited a star-forming region, why don't you drop by a living fossil galaxy? For example, DG-SAT-1. It's as big as the Milky Way, but it's nearly invisible because its stars are spread out incredibly thinly. But what makes the galaxy so unique is that it's sitting all alone, unlike other galaxies of this kind, which are usually found in clusters. It can mean that DG-SAT-1 was formed in a different era, probably a mere 1 billion years after the Big Bang. If it's true, the galaxy is a real living fossil. The next stop on your space sightseeing tour is the Black Widow Pulsar. Just like its spider namesake, this rotating neutron star is munching on its partner, a lightweight brown dwarf star. The more material the pulsar consumes, the more slowly it spins. The energy the neutron star is losing in the process causes the companion star to dwindle. Oh, look at this! That's a stellar nursery in the constellation of Centaurus. But even though this place might be called nursery, it's anything but peaceful or safe. This region, made up of hydrogen and newborn stars, is located in a nebula in the constellation of Centaurus, around 6,500 light-years away from Earth. The intense energy these baby stars emit makes hydrogen clouds glow ominous red. This energy is so powerful that it's eating away dark clouds of dust, and they're disappearing like lumps of butter on a hot frying pan. You're continuing your journey when you see something absolutely amazing, a cloud of water floating in space. To be more precise, it's a cloud of water vapor surrounding a supermassive black hole 12 billion light-years away from Earth. The cloud contains 140 trillion times the entire volume of water on our planet. Astronomers believe this water cloud appeared just 1.6 billion years later than the universe itself.
We often see humans living on other planets like Mars. Colonizing our solar system and beyond has long been a dream of humankind. The idea of humans going to space dates back to at least 1610. A German astronomer named Johannes Kepler wrote to an Italian astronomer named Galileo. Kepler said that we could create ships to travel in space, and even create maps of the stars. People got more excited about space during the famous space race. NASA was created in the 50s. They did many cool things, like sending space stations, Mars rovers, and exploring other planets. All this made space travel seem more real. Today, we've developed to the point where we finally discuss the possibility of space tourism. We're already sending regular people into space. Only very rich people, of course. But many believe that, in just a few decades, space tourism will become normal. We'll be able to fly to Earth's orbit and back, as if on some kind of tour. Spaceships will replace airplanes, and it will only take 2 hours to get from Australia to England. And finally, we'll begin to travel to other planets in our solar system. Some scientists even believe we'll have colonies on the Moon or Mars by the 2060s. In the future, we could colonize not only Mars, but some of the moons, like our own, Ceres, Titan, and others. But the thing is, why do we even want to live on other planets? Surprising question, huh? Sure, the answer might seem obvious at first glance. Humans want to learn about space and other planets. This curiosity is what led us to other big discoveries like going to the Antarctic and the Moon. Next, safety, of course. Humans have a moral duty to ensure our survival. Colonizing space could protect us from disasters that might wipe out life on Earth. Plus, by settling space, we improve our chances of survival and fulfill a moral obligation to do so. Besides, with Earth's overpopulation, colonizing other planets could relieve the strain on our home planet. Another thing is, colonizing a planet means living there and using its resources. And let me tell you, there are lots of resources in space. Our solar system alone has things to use for fuel, like Titan. Space colonization could bring us clean energy, access to new materials, new technologies, and so on. The more we colonize space and learn about it, the more we could benefit humanity. More technology, more exploration, more innovation, and so on. History also says explorers are way less likely to get into fights. Expanding and exploring, scientists claim, keeps us busy with cool discoveries, growth, and research. The more we explore, the less we're stuck with our earthly problems. But on the other hand, not everyone is interested in going to space. And maybe colonizing space isn't as good an idea as it seems. First of all, is it even possible? Some people say that living in space is just too far-fetched. You might have heard about terraforming. Terraforming basically means changing and improving the planet however we want, as if we were in some character maker in a video game. Sounds great. In theory. In reality, terraforming Mars, for example, could take hundreds of years and cost millions of dollars, according to experts. Colonizing our moon could cost an unimaginable $104 billion. It's 7 times NASA's yearly budget. And that's not even counting the earthly costs. But the biggest, most important question is it really that cool to live in space, though? Space isn't your cozy home at all. Most celestial bodies are radiation hotspots, all because of the solar winds. Imagine a wind so fierce that it can strip planets of their very atmospheres. Our sun is a real danger to each planet in the system. Yes, including our own Earth. Stars are crazy powerful. They shoot out charged particles all the time. These particles can zoom around at incredible speeds, going up to 5 million miles per hour. These gusts of particles can leave an entire planet all barren. Poof. No more life-sustaining air. The water on the planet would evaporate, then freeze. The temperature would plummet to very chilling. And even daytime skies would be as black as night. Lucky for us, Earth has an amazing shield called a magnetosphere. It protects us from these space winds. But scientists are studying these winds to help us find other friendly planets out there. By checking out stars' properties, gravity, and magnetic fields, we can see if their planets can truly host life. And it's very hard to find a planet that isn't showered by radiation all the time. It has to have a very thick atmosphere, like on Earth, to prevent this from happening. Unfortunately, we haven't discovered any planets like this so far, which is why living in space would mean dealing with crazy health problems. Temperatures and radiation are just the beginning. What about muscle loss, troubles with vision, and many other things? Humans are way too vulnerable for that. Robots are more suited for space exploration due to its hostile conditions. Let's take Mars, for example. The red planet is freezing and very uninviting. In fact, the Earth could face almost anything, even mega problems, and still be better than Mars. Mars is a desert with barely any water, very far from the idea of a dream home. Let's imagine that the Earth's air get polluted. Mars still wouldn't be better. The air there is super thin and 96% carbon dioxide. Earth's air is a cakewalk compared to that. Or even if a huge asteroid crashes into Earth, we're still better off here than on other planets. It might even be a pretty big asteroid, like the one that wiped off the dinosaurs. This event was absolutely catastrophic, plunging the Earth into utter chaos. It created a massive crater called the Chicxulub crater. The impact led to massive fires, tsunamis, and a lot of dust and debris flying into the sky. The dust and debris blocked out the sun for a long time. Can you imagine what happens when there's no sunlight at all for a while? Everything got really cold and dark. This darkness and coldness affected plants and animals. Without sunlight, plants couldn't make food through photosynthesis, and that meant many animals lost their source of food. And these were only short-term consequences. Of course, many species became extinct because of that, but even with all that, 25% of species managed to survive somehow. If this same asteroid had hit Mars, the outcome would have been much worse. Mars doesn't have enough things like water and air to support life like Earth does, so the consequences would be way harsher. Actually, the Earth survived not 1, but 5 mass extinctions. And life still managed to thrive on our planet, even after all that. As you can see, it's almost impossible to make the Earth completely inhabitable. Our planet will always be the most habitable place compared to anywhere else in our solar system, unless we do something extremely insane. Which is why we need to protect it. Here we come to the famous "the Earth's in trouble" argument. If something bad happens to our planet, why not focus on fixing it instead of flying away? Critics argue that if we can't take care of Earth, we shouldn't spread our problems to other planets or moons. Are we really capable of responsibly colonizing other worlds if we can't even manage our own? Plus, there's still so much to explore even on our own planet. Humans haven't even lived in Antarctica or under Earth's oceans yet. Are we sure we're ready for worlds that are even more extreme than that? So, even if Earth gets into trouble, we shouldn't just ditch it. We have to work together and create safe zones. It would be a big challenge, sure, but it's still way more doable and cheaper than building space colonies. Of course, the idea of humans living in space and traveling to other planets is very exciting, but we should never forget our sweet home, and we should remember that life isn't science fiction. We should use our technology rationally and focus on making the Earth safer and better. And what do you think about it?
Traveling to space costs a fortune, but there's a way to make it affordable. You step into an elevator, push the button, and voila! You're flying to the stars, all thanks to nanotubes. But then something hits the elevator on the way. You're stuck inside, and now you're doomed to float in space forever. Now, if you want to travel in space, get ready to shell out around $55 million. But in the near future, you'll probably be able to travel to space with just the push of a button without breaking the bank, because space elevators might come into play. While the idea of galactic lifts seems like something out of a sci-fi movie, it is a real possibility that could revolutionize space travel. With an estimated cost of $8 billion, space elevators could be a one-time investment that would last us forever. NASA alone spends around $2.7 million on rocket fuel per minute. To launch a rocket, they need to pay up to $178 million. These costs could be significantly reduced with the use of elevators. Most super tall buildings on Earth have a massive foundation to help with their balance and weight. As you look up, they get thinner and thinner. Even the tallest building in the world, the Burj Khalifa, is massive at the bottom and narrow at the top. If we wanted to construct something like a gigantic lift, we would need an enormous amount of concrete to build a foundation for it, which goes against the point of saving some cash. Now, get a string, tie a ball at the end of it, and start spinning it. The string in your hand will stay in one place, and the ball will revolve around your hand. This is called centrifugal force, and the elevator will work in the same way. The ball will be the base in space, and the rope will hang toward Earth. The station from where we would enter the elevator would be in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and the line would extend from there. For this to be possible, the line must be perfectly synchronized with Earth's rotation. Otherwise, it would simply break or wrap around the Earth like a scarf. Also, the orbit the line would be following should be a perfect circle. because the line wouldn't be able to get shorter or extend. A bunch of research has been done using algebra to find the ideal solution. Wait a second, there's a use for algebra? Never mind. Meanwhile, I won't bore you with the math. We'll go straight to the point where the precise distance from the station in the Atlantic to the one in space must be 22,236 miles above the Earth, where the geosynchronous orbit starts. There, the four outward forces are much stronger than the downward force. That's why the station would stay in one place. When you construct a house or a building, you start from the bottom going up. But to create this engineering wonder, we would need to do everything in reverse and start at the top. The main problem here would be the weight. If the line was too heavy, it would disrupt the orbit, and the conveyor dumbwaiter host would not work. So, we need to balance the station in space to ensure it worked flawlessly. Steel is one of the most robust materials on Earth. The cable in every lift is made from steel. But when you need a 22,236-mile-long cable, things can get tricky. Steel is hard to break, but it's cumbersome, and when you have to use a lot of it, problems start to arise. We use heavy steel a lot in construction, but we have lighter materials that might put less stress on the station and eliminate this problem. Also, the line would have to be tapered because, at the endpoint, there would be close to zero stress. But it would still have to be thicker than really needed due to a bunch of safety factors. At the start, the rope would be around 0.5 inches. After using some complicated math, we can figure out the thickness at the end, which is a number so long I am unable to pronounce it. But believe me, it's a big one. So, steel is off the list. Another candidate is Kevlar, which is 5 times stronger than steel. And if we added such materials as carbon and titanium into the mix, the strength would increase tenfold. The line would have a diameter of around 262 to 557 feet. This is drastically smaller than the diameter of the steel cable could be. The bad news is that doing this is too pricey. So, if we don't find the ideal medium to build a cable, the idea of the space elevator will just be a massive waste of time. If only we had some magically light material with a power of 60 gigapascals, which would have a taper ratio of 1.6. Oh wait, we actually do have this unique material. It's called carbon nanotube. It has a strength of 130 gigapascals, which is much more than we need. Nanotubes are made out of carbon and are 100,000 times thinner than a human hair. This material is solid and has good conductive power, which is possible thanks to its unique atomic structure. We use this product in many things, from batteries to optics, and it can be modified entirely and adapted for more uses. Bradley Edwards is the guy responsible for this crazy idea. NASA was looking for new innovations, and they said, "Don't do anything too crazy and start building a space hoist." I guess Bradley took this as a challenge and started working on the elevator. Edwards wrote a paper about a galactic conveyor. When he published it, he expected many people to find flaws in his work, but surprisingly, nobody did. His work was spot on. He came up with the idea of strapping a nanotube line to a rocket and launching it into space. The other end of the rope would fall onto Earth, and robots would use this rope to climb up and make it longer, so we could start building an elevator space station. After this, the elevator could start transporting everything, from solar panels to tourists. In the future, space tourism could be totally possible. Who knows? We might even go on vacations in space. Hey, looking for some atmosphere for your getaway? Well, don't come here. We don't have any. Oops, probably not a good advertising slogan, huh? Meanwhile, a couple of years ago, we could only create microscopic carbon nanotubes. But as time went on, much more research was done to make them bigger. Now they reach up to a few inches. In 20 years, they could be miles long. Carbon costs $28 per ounce. If we do the math, we would see that we would need around $1 billion to build a lift. Yeah, it sounds expensive, but it's a long-term solution to space travel, and it can actually save us a lot of money in the long run. Now, everything looks perfect on paper, but NASA's main reason why they chose not to go along with this project is that right now there are probably more than 128 million objects floating in orbit, and they might pose a real threat to the elevator. The lift could be made to withstand a few hits now and then, but getting hammered non-stop is not part of the plan. Still, Bradley argues that tons of monitoring devices track space debris. Thus, the elevator could avoid them all. Now, if something hit the elevator or the line somehow broke, the consequences would not be too bad. If there were no passengers on board, of course. If the line got cut, the elevator would simply float away into space, posing no threat to people on Earth. In Japan, engineers are trying to build a space elevator. The lift could be used for space mining, too. We could easily cover the cost of the entire elevator by collecting asteroids, because some of them are made of expensive metals. We could mine them and quickly bring them back to Earth. So, what comes to your mind when you hear the words green monster? The Hulk? Shrek? Probably. But definitely not a young supernova in the Milky Way galaxy. Oh, and if you have forgotten what our home galaxy looks like, here, have a look. So anyway, is that supernova indeed green and, scary? Not really. But let's start from the very beginning. Cassiopeia A, aka Cass A, is the remnants of a stellar explosion astronomers spotted in the sky 340 years ago. This supernova is 11,000 light-years away from us in the constellation Cassiopeia, and its remains span about 10 light-years. Recently, scientists have managed to capture the sharpest image of these leftovers yet, all thanks to the James Webb Space Telescope, the largest optical telescope in space. The image is full of bright colors, brilliant green, orange, and pink. Maybe if you printed it out, it would make a great painting for your living room. Just like this canvas. Each hue represents a different wavelength of infrared light, which is normally invisible to the human eye. The image can help astronomers figure out what happened to the poor star before its demise. Cass A is the youngest known remnant of a massive star that once exploded in our galaxy. On its exterior, at the top and left, you can see curtains of material that seem red and orange because of the emission of warm dust. That's where the ejected material from the exploded star collides with the surrounding gas and dust. Inside this outer shell, there are chunks of bright pink bubble-shaped material that form clumps and knots. It comes from the star itself. This material is shining because of the mix of heavy elements like neon, argon, and oxygen. Astronomers have spotted some dust emissions in that region too, but they haven't located the sources of these emissions yet. There's also a prominent green loop extending across the right side of the supernova's central cavity. And if you look closely, you'll notice that a big region of Cass A is pockmarked with something that looks like small bubbles, which makes the thing even more complex and hard to understand. The first X-rays from Cass A appeared in the 60s, but light from the supernova probably reached Earth in the 1600s. Unfortunately, there are no confirmed written observations of the supernova from those times. It must have looked like an extremely bright star, and historians still doubt whether any observers noticed it. Oh, and I bet you've been wondering about the nickname, right? This space phenomenon was called the Green Monster in honor of Fenway Park in Boston. Its large green left-field wall has the same name. One of the main questions Cass A might help us answer is, where does all that cosmic dust come from? Astronomers have discovered that even very young galaxies at the early stages of their lives are filled with massive amounts of dust. So, does the universe need vacuum cleaning, or is the problem more complicated? One of the crucial components in the appearance of this dust seems to be supernova. They spew truly terrifying amounts of heavy elements, which are basically building blocks of dust across the cosmos. So let's try to figure out what these supernovae are and how they occur. Good old stars keep their spherical shape because their gigantic mass creates a powerful gravitational field that pulls gas toward the center, and at the same time, their cores produce enough energy to prevent gas from gathering too close to the center. All this creates a nice balance and a beautiful ball-like shape. But once a star becomes too old and massive, about 4 to 8 times as big as our Sun, it doesn't have any more fuel left. That's why all the reactions in its core stop. The star's outer layers instantly try to collapse inward, but they bounce off the core, which remains incredibly dense. That's when everything but the star's core blasts out all over the universe in a bright supernova explosion. Now, as you may know, our solar system itself can be a pretty scorching place. For example, the temperature of Earth's core almost reaches a whopping 10,800 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about as hot as the temperature on the surface of the Sun. As for the Sun's super hot center, it's heated up to 27 million degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, that's hot. But if we talk about the universe, such temperatures are nowhere near hot in comparison with a supernova. As you now know, it's the very last stage of a star's life, which ends in a gigantic explosion. This explosion is one of the largest in space, and it unleashes enormous amounts of energy. Therefore, the temperature at the core of a supernova is an incredible 6,000 times higher than that of the Sun's core. And it means it can reach several billion degrees Fahrenheit within microseconds, which is almost impossible to imagine. After that, atoms get crammed together so infinitely closely that the squeezed core recoils and a star explodes, creating a superheated shockwave. Anyway, let's get back to our Cas A. By studying it with the help of the James Webb Telescope, astronomers hope to get a better understanding of its dust content. This, in turn, will help them figure out where the building blocks of stars, planets, satellites, and us humans come from. Experts can locate regions with different gas composition and look at the types of dust that form there. Oh, by the way, if you're interested in space too, but don't have your access to the James Webb Telescope, you can get yourself a telescope of your own and enjoy amazing views. Supernovae, as the one which created Cas A, are very important for life as we know it. They spread such elements as, for example, calcium that we have in our bones, or iron our blood contains, literally seeding new stars and planets. You, my friend, are made from star stuff. Supernovae don't always mean the end of stars. Even though a star loses its outer layer, it might still survive the explosion. Then it either becomes a black hole or a new kind of star. See for yourself. Even without the outer layers, a star's core keeps collapsing. At one moment, the pressure inside becomes so high that electrons and protons virtually melt into each other and form neutrons. The result of this crazy fusion is a neutron star, whose mass consists of 90% of neutrons. It means that the thing just can't get squashed any tighter. Then, energy starts to leave the fading star, transforming it into a neutron star. And the amount of this energy is so great that it can be compared with the combined light emitted by all the stars in the observable universe. Energy is leaving the star in the form of neutrinos, subatomic particles that are similar to electrons but with no electric charge and a very small mass. And during a supernova explosion, the star emits almost 10 times more neutrinos than the number of protons, electrons, and neutrons in the Sun. No wonder that in such conditions, something truly scary gets born. A neutron star, which is basically a monster nucleus, the central part of an atom, is relatively small. Even though scientists don't know for sure how big neutron stars are, they suppose that these space bodies shouldn't be bigger than 12 miles across. For comparison, our Sun is almost 865,000 miles across, which is 109 Earths put side to side. But even with such a modest size, any neutron star will be at least 1.5 times heavier than the Sun. Think about this. If you scoop just a teaspoon of neutron star insides, this stuff would weigh no less than 1 billion tons. That's very dense. So dense that the next stop is the black hole itself. Well, what can I say? Space is an endless source of mystery and inspiration for me. I'm even considering adding some space vibes to my home, and I know just the thing to do it. Hey, don't thank me.